Hi everyone, Jacco here. I'll start by sharing my screen so you can all see the couple of slides I've prepared today. Here you go. Okay. First of all, thanks for having me today. I'm very much looking forward to briefing you a little bit on the type of work that we do at Circular Economy. I'm the lead for the business strategy team at the non-profit impact organization that is Circular Economy. And the name says it, we're in the game to really support companies and cities to transform to a circular economy. And I'll be telling you a little bit more about how to measure that transition. So we're zooming out a little bit from the technical details that have been presented thus far and really zoom a little bit more into the bigger picture. I'll first show you a little bit about why we started measuring the circular economy. I think this is a picture that most of you probably have seen before. It shows how economic growth has been really exponential since the Second World War, and how other types of related parameters have also been growing. In this picture, you can see in the blue line the material extraction, also having an exponential growth since then, but you could put CO2 emissions or water scarcity or biodiversity loss. You can all put that in the same graph and will always show that exponential growth. And of course, the circular economy is meant to mitigate that and close that gap that you can see. So see if we can find a way that we can still foster economic growth while also minimizing material use and all the negative impacts that are associated with that. We saw that happening, and this is why we started measuring as a company in 2018 how you can actually monitor the circularity of the global economy. And after that, we also introduced that method to measure the circularity of the nation state and the circularity of a company. And that's really because we believe that if you can't measure how circular you are, you can't improve on that. So we started measuring. And now, right now, we find that still people are not very sure of how urgent the situation really is. If you look at the global economy, we hear estimates of, say, 25 to 50% of circularity globally. But actually, we found that the global economy is only 9% circular. So 9% of our materials on a yearly basis are cycled in any way, reused, composted, things like that. And that means that over 90% of all the materials that we use on a yearly basis are actually lost, are just landfilled, incinerated, they disappear. And of course, they also represent a lot of economic value with that. And what I'll present to you today is a little bit of a case study, how we implemented this also to a company. And in this case, I'm presenting a bit of the results that we had for the Danish company Rockwool. Rockwool is one of the bigger producers of stone wool, so insulation materials for buildings. Basically, half of the buildings in Europe have Rockwool insulation materials in the walls or in the on the roof. And they came to us with the question of, tell us how circular the current company really is and how can we measure that. And this is what we did. We needed a couple of months, I think in this case 2 or 3 months, and arrived at this picture. It's deliberately not big enough for you to read every bit, or zoom in here and there and a little bit. What you can see here is the materials that are flowing through their value chain. So it really starts with the origin of the materials, where they are mined, or mined also at the urban stock or industrial stock, so where waste is mined for materials, and flows through a value chain, then entering the Rockwool factories, entering cities, and then at the end arriving an end of life, where it's either being cycled or landfilled or incinerated or in another way handled. And what we found, and that's in 2019 that we did that for them. We found a few things. So we started at the origin of the materials, and we found that Rockwool was actually performing quite well there. It had already quite a share of secondary, so cycled resources they used, much more than you would find on the global average. And they also designed their products in a way that they were actually quite well recyclable. If they would get their materials back, they could recycle almost up to 100% of their products. And that's quite a high rate in our experience. So they were performing quite well upstream, but then at the end of life, they really arrived at some issues. They found that the circularity of the value chain really was hampered by the fact that a lot of their products at the end of life, so after the demolition of a building or a piece of infrastructure, a lot of that materials were actually being landfilled or recycled in low value applications, that is laying the foundation, being part of the foundation of new road constructions. And that really brought them very low down in the metric. And what you saw is that it actually, they are using now these results and the report that we made for them to also convince other value chain partners, especially towards the end of life, that they need to improve on their collection and sorting methods and just basically send the materials back to Rockwool. And they also use this metric to now go to national governments and tell them that they need to help improve the situation. And they do that with a solid bag of figures to do so. We've been measuring circularity for, I'd say, about 4 years now. But since a year ago, you see that more metrics and more standards are arriving, and it's all booming this year. There's a lot of new ones coming in this year. And what you see is that there are quite some different approaches, whether it's the Ellen MacArthur Foundation introducing the Circulytics tool, or the World Business Council for Sustainable Development introducing the CTI tool, or the Global Reporting Initiative introducing a new method. They all have different approaches, different ways of defining circularity. And what we try to do now is really show how these metrics have different uses. So if you look at your own journey, from creating awareness amongst your colleagues or your peers or your customers, to really trying to identify opportunities, to build business cases, or to validate your results. For each step, you have a different metric and a different tool being developed currently. And they're also quite different when you look at the types of indicators that they use. Some of these, such as the gap metric I just showed you, the 9% for the globe, that's really a headline metric. It tells you how circular you are, no further details. There are also tools out there that really focus on giving you performance indicators. So they'll give you a lot of indicators for each step of your value chain, whether you're using a lot of renewable energy or renewable resources, if you're using a lot of secondary resources, what the recycling rate is of your products. So they really give much more granularity on the physical elements of your material flows. And then there's those tools that really focus on process, so really try to help you measure how much you've been doing to implement change, whether that's creating awareness among your employees or setting KPIs for business units. If your customers' attitudes towards your products already have changed, if they're demanding more green products, etc. So really those indicators that don't directly improve the circularity of your business, but can really tell you where the blockades are for your further improvement. And if you plot those, you can see that the current metrics that are out there are really across the board, from the circularity gap metric and the cradle to cradle metric that really focus on headlines, or the GRI standard that really includes a lot of performance and process indicators and is really well shaped to help you monitor and report on your progress. Whereas Circulytics from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is much more a light tool, just to quickly grab the attention of your audience, create a bit of awareness, and set a baseline, but not too many details are given in that one. We're publishing on a report on all these tools in a few weeks, because we feel there's a lot of unclarity right now. We're hoping to educate people more on which tool to use when and how you can help that for your business. So I think that's about my time. I think I'm well on time. So if there's this is what we do on a daily basis. So there's much more detail I can tell here. I'm very curious to see if there are any questions or debate that we could have now.
Okay, thank you so much, Jacco. I think that Francesco has remarks on your presentation, and then we are waiting for other questions if there are. Francesco.
Yeah. If there is any question, you can type it in the Q&A or in the chat. No, personally, as I said already at the beginning of the session, I think the measuring circularity is really one of the most important activity at the moment. Really, in order to switch to a circular solution, first of all, you need to measure it. Otherwise, you don't know like where you're going. No, it's really the initial step. Even if you want to define a target, so it's really the base. And the circular economy has been a little bit advanced on that, starting with the measuring at the global level. And so I also, we are in talk a little bit also with Jacco to see how we can try to partner together, also to bring the solution a little bit further in Italy. So I just want to say to all the companies that might be interested in going a little bit more in deep in understanding how to measure circularity, and after how to really develop circular solution, we are trying to test this partnership. We are really excited to partner with someone like Circular Economy. It's a great experience, and also this is also due because one of the members of Circular Economy is actually also part of Tondo Lab. It is Cheyenne. And so this is also to do that. And again, to our strong connection with the Netherlands that we are trying to develop in different kind of ways.
Yeah, there is a question for Jacco. How your methodology differs from others, for example, life cycle assessment?
Yeah, I'll be able to answer that. Well, first of all, I'd be pressed to say that it's not so much our methodology. We work together with the scientific committee to develop the metric and still do so. A lot of credit should also go to our academic partners. How it differs from life cycle analysis? Well, actually, there is a lot of similarities. I think especially the first steps, the data that we use, the kind of overviews that we have, for those that are familiar with life cycle analysis, it's very similar. Where we differ is the metrics used. Life cycle analysis is really, and the units, I should say as well. Life cycle analysis is really trying to measure impacts, environmental impacts along the value chain, and is usually a methodology that you apply at the end of a design process or the end of a manufacturing investment, and try to see what the impacts are. We're building these figures really at the early stage of the design, so we're really trying to inform design and investments, and we're really using, we're only looking at the mass units in mass, and we are applying a circularity metric. And the reason why that's so different is that the whole measuring circularity, you can definitely see that in more detail in the other tools that are also available, is really geared to finding solutions, whereas life cycle analysis is really geared to measuring the impact of solutions. This is a methodology that's really geared towards finding and identifying where solutions are. So it's quite a different process, but if you can do an LCA, it's not very hard to understand how you can also do a circularity assessment. It's quite similar.